Good afternoon, everyone. If I could have your attention, please. We're ready to begin. Take your seats. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for coming. This is the first of two sessions today, today and tomorrow, to go through our budget for the upcoming fiscal year. Thank you for all those that have put work into it so far, for being here to report too. I assume most of you are here for that as well. At this point, I'd like to ask you to please stand and join me for a moment of silence, and then we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. Join me, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, if we could have a roll call, please.
Brad Hant.
Here.
Sean Brewster.
Here.
Pete Hamill.
Here.
Wayne Barahona.
Here.
Tom Eggers.
Here. Okay. Moving on to the approval of the agenda, you have that before you. Take a motion to approve that now, please.
So move.
Support. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Brewster.
Aye.
Hamill.
Aye.
Eggers.
Aye.
Barahona.
Aye.
Hant.
Aye. All right. Moving on to our public comments portion of the meeting. If you are here to speak to anything, now would be your time, unless you are presenting as a department head your budget. When that time comes, you will be allowed to speak at that point. But if you're here just speaking in general, now would be your time. I have a few instructions for you first. I'm going to read those, whether you're joining us by Zoom or you're here in the room with us. First of all, raise your hand or signal in by Zoom somehow to be recognized by myself. And then come to the podium and state your name and address. If you have handouts, please give them to the city clerk before the meeting. Be concise and limit your comments to 4 minutes. You may not save your time for later or yield the remainder of your time to someone else. After speaking, please be seated. If you are addressing a matter on the agenda, state the agenda item you are speaking about. And if you are speaking on more than one agenda item, arrange your comments in chronological order. Try not to duplicate information that has already been presented. Direct your comments to the entire council, not to an individual. Questions and issues raised during this time will generally not be answered during that time. Maintain a courteous and respectful manner. If you are the presenter for an item which has been formally placed on the council agenda, this public forum process does not apply, although you are asked to be succinct in your presentation. Iowa law requires certain matters to have public hearings, which have their own comment periods. Comments pertaining to a public hearing item should be saved for that item, and the 4-minute comment period will also apply for those public hearings. Thank you for all that are attending and for this very important business meeting. So with that, are there anyone here that has public comments they would like to address us with now? I see no activity in the audience. Is there anyone on Zoom? Nothing there? Okay. Then we can move forward to item 4, an overview. Is that you, Sam?
It is, otherwise known as overview.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. I have linked my memo. I don't think there's a lot that I need to add to that. I'll stand for questions if anybody has any. Otherwise, I think we can move on into the department presentations. We did link the mayor council goals or the staff goals that were all collectively discussed December of 19. That's linked for your information. It's also printed for your budget.
Okay. And any questions for Sam now, or can we move forward? We do have a hard stop at 6:30, so we're going to try and get through all the department presentations and also some of Angie's stuff. So we're going to ask you again to be succinct in your presentations. but we do want to be out of here by 6:30 because we'll be coming back again tomorrow too. So we have a lot of information to go through. At this point, then, we'd like to start with the department presentations. Rob, are you presenting today for the airport? If you would come forward, please. Again, state your name.
I'm Rob Dixon, current chairman of the Airport Commission, presenting for the airport here in this budget meeting, and thank you for that opportunity, everybody. Our budget, you've seen, I presume, and as we project for the new year, we feel that our basic operating expense will be somewhat less by about $6,000 over the prior year, and as some of the improvements we had scheduled this past year were completed, and thus basic operating going into the new year is a lesser amount by about $6,000. We do have some needs to address in the new year, and should point out that our most pressing and immediate need here, and as we've scheduled it in the projected budget for the new year, is our fuel farm, which is old and in need of repair. It dates back to the 50s, and it's the mechanics of it, the hoses, the reels, etc., are old and difficult to operate in cold weather, etc. And the importance of our fuel farm at the airport is obvious, certainly critical that we be able to service the fuel needs of transient and local airport traffic, and thus we have that at the top of our needs for the new year. We are intending to pursue a State of Iowa DOT grant in that respect, and I should say the cost of this phase one, and we've split it out in two phases over the next couple of years, but the most important needs and improvements are addressed in phase one and are to be serviced by way of a State of Iowa DOT grant, which will cover 85% of the projected $42,500 cost of those improvements, and thus leaving 15% of that number for to be serviced locally. We have that all addressed again in our budget for the new year. On the income side, we show the 85% coming in from the state, along with all other expected revenues for the new year. We do see here that one of our most important sources of revenue is the rent of our farm ground, tillable ground out there, and in the recent and current farm economy, why we've renegotiated that, and that comes down by a little over, or just about $5,000. So we have that decrease in revenue, but others sources staying pretty steady, and including the DOT's portion of this fuel farm improvement. And then on the other side, as we move through down through operating expenses, basic overhead, as I said, those items, some $6,000 less this year than last, but we also add this year, per Sam's recommendation, a $20,000 local match here, capital improvement funds that apparently other departments utilize as a banking of sorts of funds for capital improvements down the road. so that is part of total expense. And then, of course, the total cost of fuel farm improvements, $42.5. And all that taken into account, our expenses exceed revenue by about $1,800 as they're listed here. We feel that's a pretty good number, pretty close number. We are, FYI, we are reviewing our contract with our FBO here, which hasn't been updated in over 20 years, 22 years, I believe, and some of the rents that Midwest Flying Service pays to the city are addressed in that contract, and as we review it and update it, thus they too will be reviewed. But everything included, including the fuel farm improvements and capital improvement funds of $20,000 and so on here, we are our expenses are just about as it stands here, $1,800 in excess of projected revenues. So, questions?
What is current hangar rent?
It varies depending on the location size of the hangars. I believe, help me out, we run from top end of 135 currently on the larger hangars.
Per month, that would be?
Per month. And the smaller hangars, I believe, are at 65 per month. The smallest currently at 90 then? Okay. All right. And what is it? 24 of 29 hangar spaces are
22 of 24.
22 of 24.
are currently, or 22 of 24 currently occupied, rented, which is good. And we maintain a pretty high occupancy out there. Our airport is busy in spite of the pandemic issues. Midwest Flying Service has done an excellent job in maintaining and keeping it busy and servicing the community and its transportation needs. As the pandemic has had its effect on commercial business aviation, Lyle and Carrie out there have stepped up and become more active medically, as is referenced in these notes, as organ donor transplant flights of 2 to 3 or even more. The other week it was all 7 days, I think, just about with that. And Sanford and their needs for fixed-wing aircraft in and out of the airport 4 or 5 times a week, and various other few commercial flights, some flight instruction ongoing, and so our airport stays busy and continues as a resource, important resource to our community and the economic development of our community, as there's a reference in there too of how business, new business, looks to communities that are served by general aviation airports and look to locate by such facilities. So certainly our airport plays a very important role in that respect.
Okay.
Anything else?
Rob, you brought up renewing or reviewing the contract that you have with the FBO. Can you explain a little bit about what that contract is and what may be changing with that as you look forward?
Well, the FBO contract is an agreement between the Airport Commission representing the city and the FBO as they operate on the city's grounds out there, and it spells out what we expect of the FBO in as they operate and maintain the airport. And liability was one item that Sam had made note of and felt there was need of improvement, being more specific and precise in the detailing of liability issues as pertains to each party. And so that we're looking at, but then it also spells out the rents that the FBO pays to the commission/city for use of facilities out there, and those haven't been updated in 22 years or more, and so that's part of it, and we will be looking at that. But in general, it spells out the responsibilities of each party: city, airport commission, and FBO, and so on. And we'll review all of that.
You have a timeline for that?
Oh, let's see. We got a meeting next week, I believe, to begin that process.
Well, 22 years of changes need to be updated. I can imagine that would be more than just a couple of keystrokes.
Well, yes.
All right. Are there any more questions for Rob? Okay. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Rob.
Up next, then, we have ambulance. Kevin Miller.
Good evening, guys.
Kevin.
So I first want to start off my presentation with a few numbers. We haven't been able to give you guys a year-end report, but we do have it compiled here, and I do have a few numbers for you to go over. So as of December 31, 2020, we ended our year with 36 members. That included 6 RNs and medics on an AEM team, as well as 14 EMTs, 3 EMRs, and 8 drivers. That also included EMT and RN students of 2, and high school students we have 3. That did include the firefighters that are on our roster as well. Looking at the call volume of what we ran last year, we ran 745 calls. That is compared to 668 calls in 2019, 658 calls in 2018, and 556 calls in 2017. So as you can see, those are increasing. Just to give you guys an idea on how many calls are 911, we did have 509 911 calls, and then 236 transfer calls. And those would be any transfers from one hospital to another healthcare facility with that. We also, this past year, with our fundraiser and everything with COVID, I did want to give you guys an update on that. We weren't able to have an in-person fundraiser, but we did put some information out there to the public, and we did receive a pretty good response. So we thank those who have donated. This year, we are still planning on hosting our fundraiser, our Scat Supper in May, and we also are looking at hosting a 50th anniversary in August as well. I also wanted to give you guys a little update on our staffing model that we have on SCAT. Right now, we have one full-time employee, Kristen, and then we have a part-time employee, Melissa. And then the rest of our people are staffed as volunteers. So how we operate things is we staff one ambulance 24/7, and we have about 2 to 3 people that run on that ambulance on a schedule. Our SCAT 2 and our SCAT 3 are mass response ambulances, with SCAT 1 being gone. If it is gone, then we will send out a message and get staff for SCAT 2. So I did want to give you guys an update on that, just because sometimes that's not always known with that. So now going into some of our things that we are requesting for this budget year. If you look at our line item budget, we are having an increase in wages. As we've talked about in the years past, we've had an increase in wages, partly because call volume is going up. As our call volume goes up, so our demand for our staffing goes up as well. Another thing that's increasing because of that is we do have in there for a full-time employee, and I will get to that in just a second. Another thing on our line item budget, if you look at our maintenance service contract, we are increasing that. One reason we're increasing that is because with us having 3 rigs, each of those has quite a bit of equipment in there. One of the biggest expenses for our equipment includes our power cots, which are very essential to our service. And those, if a cot would go down, a new cot cost about $15,000 to replace. So with our maintenance contract, they ensure that if they come down and they do an annual service for us, and they also would do any parts, anything that would need to be replaced, it would be included within that contract. So that is something we're looking at. Nothing is locked in stone, but we want to be able to have the mobility within our budget to make that decision moving forward. If you look now to our capital improvement, I'm going to talk about that a little bit. We have in there pagers. How pagers work, our last set of pagers were called Miniature 5s. That's through Motorola. Our new pagers that they're coming out with and have been out are Miniature 6s. We do have quite a bit of Miniature 5s. However, some of them are irreplaceable because when you send them in, they're not able to be replaced anymore. So we are looking at purchasing new pagers. We also have an equipment budget in there to replace anything that might come up throughout the year, as well as gear bags if any bags would need to be replaced. And then we also have an electronic fund, which would consist of replacing any iPads, any electronics that we need, such as computer updates, things like that. The 2 big things that we have on our capital improvement, one would be an emergency response vehicle. So one of the reasons why this came about is the fact that we do have a full-time employee within the city that does need an emergency response vehicle to respond to calls. It can be very dangerous for them to respond to calls in their own personal vehicle should they not be on call with the ambulance. And that might happen because there's other people responding in the ambulance, or if it would be a case where we would want someone to respond first, such as a CPR or a major trauma, it's nice to have the full-time person respond right to the scene. Some things to note about the emergency response vehicle is it can be stored outside because it's not an ambulance. The state does not require it to be stored inside a building. Other options could be a take-home vehicle for either the director or the full-time person. It can be used for day-to-day operations as well as various errands. And in the future, as we start onboarding more paramedics, as we start seeing the need for more paramedic assist from the other agencies, and that could be an option as having that as a response vehicle rather than taking our ambulance down the road every time. So that is one of the big ticket items we have on our capital improvement. And the next ticket item we have is a full-time employee. So we do have it budgeted within our wages to increase that. Just a side note, we are still keeping our part-time and our current full-time as well. It would be an additional full-time employee. One of the biggest reasons why we're requesting another full-time employee is because when you look at our roster, when you look at our schedule, there are some areas on the schedule that definitely get tight as far as our staffing model goes. We have a great team that's willing to step up to the plate, but in my perspective, I'd rather be proactive than reactive. When you are looking at some of the agencies around us, you kind of start seeing how their staffing model has held up. So you look at towns that possibly can't respond to calls or have to share with another agency. I don't want Sheldon to be in that same predicament down the road. And so it's really important for me to be proactive rather than reactive with that. If you do look at our roster, there is a possibility that if someone's health would change, if someone's life would change, they potentially could be off the roster tomorrow. Unfortunately, I'm an example of that, where I had some life changes. Now I'm off the roster, not able to take call. And so I do think it's important as a city we do look at that, and we are looking at the schedule in that aspect. Another reason is because SCAT overall is becoming more comprehensive as far as the business side of it goes. Before, it was feasible for SCAT to be staffed with volunteers as their director, assistant director, training officer, secretary. As we've seen in the past, we have had to update that staffing model to take into account some of those business aspects of the team that are increasing as our call volume increases, as well as the state requirements for an ambulance service increases as well. So it definitely could help fill some officer positions, and then it would also help ensure adequate staffing for 911 and transfers as well. With that. And then just the overall business and community relations of our team, I think would be a benefit of having a full-time employee oversee that as well. Some of the questions that I kind of was thinking about, I was going through the budget, is what does our revenue versus expense look like? Is SCAT manageable, right? And so I did work with Angie to get some of those numbers pulled up. And I do have those for you. So, for example, for budget year 2017 to 2018, I'm not going to go into specifics, but we can get you a copy of this information as well. We did profit $66,080. In 2018 to 2019, it was $46,854. In 2019, it was 927. Now, 2019 and 2020, that's a different year because we do have to take into account the bond, the $650,000 is also included in there. And so that is kind of an off year. And we also had a look at, we did purchase an ambulance in there as well. And then along with 2 police cars and fire truck as well with that bond money and stuff like that. So that does have to be taken into account a little bit as well. I also wanted to point out, I know write-offs have been a question of you guys in the past. We are always talking about Medicaid, Medicare write-offs. However, one thing that we do have to note is that it is somewhat out of SCAT's control with the write-offs. The reason for that being is at the state level, they set a contract with the Medicaid, Medicare, and they determine the pay that they will reimburse the city of Sheldon for those runs. So, with that, as we see the call volume increase, I fully expect that we're going to see the write-offs increase as well. So don't get scared off by that, because an ambulance write-off is a loss of revenue, not necessarily an expense to the city with that. And so as you can see with our numbers, we're still in the making money with the ambulance rather than we're not losing a bunch of money to our ambulances. So that is something that we like to see as far as managing a balanced budget with the ambulance service as well. Some other things that I want to talk about is we come back year after year, we've asked for an additional rig, we asked for additional staff, and one of the questions you guys might have is, at what point is SCAT going to stop growing? At what point are we going to have to look at things differently? Well, one of the things I looked at is eventually SCAT will come to a point and almost plateau with our numbers. When that time frame is, that's hard to tell, but I definitely think that it's important to note, as the city of Sheldon grows, so must our ambulance team. We're going to keep seeing an increase in call volume as long as the city of Sheldon grows because of a couple different things. We do have an elderly population in Sheldon, which accounts for some of our calls. We also have the Christian Retirement Home, Fieldcrest, Cobble Creek. We have various apartment complexes. Sanford Sheldon is always increasing their patient load. And then we also have NCC. All of these are going to continue to grow, but all of them are also places that are going to want to keep fully housed. And so as we see that, we're going to keep seeing our numbers at least stay steady at the 700 mark, but I anticipate it growing in the years to come. And the last thing that I wanted to mention, that's something that I wanted to update you guys on, is we did sign that Archer agreement. One of the things that I wanted to pull numbers for you guys is how often do we respond outside of the city limits? We responded outside of the city limits approximately 10 times for actual 911 calls. Now, that doesn't mean we're responding to other towns. That just means that the address, that I pulled marked an address outside of the city of Sheldon. So, for example, if we go to an accident for P-Assist and it was in Hospers, that's why that got flagged as an out-of-city limits call. So I just wanted to give you guys an update, and I'm open to any questions from you guys.
Yeah, Kevin, I got a question
Yeah.
or two. Out of your numbers for the total calls of 745, you stated that 509 were related to 911 activity. That would leave 236 to other. The 745 represents about a 12% increase from the previous year. So is the growth linear between both 911 and other, or is there an area that we saw the 12% increase more prevalent?
Sure. So for 2019, we did see about a 130 call increase. We had 388 911s to 509. And then for transfers, it was 280 transfers in 2019, and we had 236 transfers in 2020.
Okay.
Good question.
Okay.
So we were actually down in transfers.
And then I think my last question is in regards to the emergency response vehicle
Yeah.
position. How is that shared between SCAT and the fire department?
Right now, we would be looking at it being for SCAT. If the fire department would need to use it for a specific event that we were at, we could definitely look at that as well.
So does the fire department get emergency calls by chance, or do they all go to SCAT?
What do you mean by that?
Well, whatever your definition of emergency response is.
Oh, okay. So all medical calls go to SCAT, like fire and SCAT are not paged out together. If we would need more assistance from fire, or it would be an accident or a structure fire, fire also gets paged to those.
Yeah, that's where I was thinking about. So
Good question.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks for the clarification on that.
Did that clarify that, Brad?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
we get called if the ambulance would need us, or we get called jointly for 1050 PIs, and then occasionally they're supposed to be paged out for any structure fire that we have in town.
Sure. Okay.
Sometimes that happens, it just depends on the dispatcher and the communications and what's going on.
Okay.
So,
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about this emergency response vehicle that you have in mind? Are we talking minivan, armored vehicle? What exactly are you looking at?
Sure. So what we were looking at, so we did look into when the police department was getting trading in those vehicles. That's kind of the vehicle we're looking at.
So kind of the SUV type?
Yep. Because that could store our equipment in the back and also store anything that we would need to.
Sure.
Yep.
Any other questions for Kevin? If not, thank you, Kevin, for being here today. And
Awesome.
thanks to your
Thank you.
team for the excellent service they provide for this community.
Will do. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Great. I have a note here, the city manager report, there is going to be no presentation. Crossroads Pavilion, is anybody, oh, there you are. You're hiding behind the flag. Come forward, please. Good to see you.
You too. Good afternoon, evening, Council, Your Honor.
Please state your name.
My name is Tricia Maindring.
Thank you.
I am the General Manager at the Crossroads Pavilion Event Center. It's not on. You can definitely have this one if you want, Wayne. Mine's on, his isn't.
Sorry, just one second.
Yeah, go ahead.
The other day, we had to unplug it and plugged it back in, and then they weren't.
Just Wayne's, that one.
No, that's pretty good to tell an IT guy he's got to reboot it. That's really good.
Did you try rebooting it?
Yeah, just shut it off, turn it back on.
Did you turn the power off? Did you check if it's plugged in? Yeah.
No? Still nothing for you?
I love it. Didn't work, did it?
Oh,
We're
there
going to
he
move
is.
forward.
He's there.
Just have him speak up. You got a loud voice.
Okay. Pete says roll it, so here we go.
Yeah, we're good.
In reading my memo that I had submitted to you all, I wanted to point out this is our 5th proposed budget, which blows me away because it doesn't seem that long that we've been open, but we have. So in looking forward to our fiscal year 21-22, just a couple of things to highlight is the biggest difference that you'll see in our budget happens to be in the revenue side. We're bumping up our pavilion rent about $8,000 compared to the past year. Everything else, as far as our expenses, are along the same lines. I think, given the history of what we have been open, has given us a better picture of how to expend, because if you recall 5-6 years ago, it was totally a shot in the dark. So we have realistic figures, a realistic budget, and I think we're rather conservative. If you notice, we tried to make our budget balanced to zero. Thank you to Mary Wallinga. She's a wizard in her little spreadsheets that she does. And then something else to point out, so expenses are about the same. Our liquor license, DRAM, that's always going to be high, and that's dependent on whatever our alcohol sales are. So we're not quite for sure what that will be, so we just plug that in and know that it could ebb and flow. And then the other thing that changed is fiscal year that we're in, we did not do any of our capital improvement plan items. Given the COVID situation that we were in and closed for a few months, we've pushed those off, but that has not affected our proposed budget for 21-22. We have a great year looking ahead. Last year, I sat up here and said we are going to have a record year, and COVID hit. We still survived, given the few months that we had to be closed or partially closed. But looking into the calendar year of 21, we've only have 4 Saturdays available, March through December. And I see those possibly being taken up, and if not, that's okay. We have over 40 weddings booked, some quinceañeras. We continue to offer community programs for the public to come, such as Chef Suzanne. We're doing events with the community theater, with some of the church services, having a unity service out there. We've got a few sportsman's banquet booked again, a concert booked this fall, which will be a fundraising event, as well as some of our holiday things. So going forward with the guidelines that we do have in place, we should still be able to have a wonderful, remarkable year, and I won't jinx it by saying I'm just going to say it's going to be a good year, because it has been. So I don't have a lot to talk about. Shocking, but I will answer any questions that you may have.
One, please. What is a quinceañera?
The quinceañera is it's like a sweet 16 in the Hispanic families, but it's celebrating the young lady's 15th birthday. And I have not been to one. I have seen pictures. I have talked to some, but we've booked 2, so I'm very curious to see how this beautiful ritual and dance and celebration happens. So,
if you think of like the pomp and circumstance of a wedding, it's just slightly less than that.
Mm-hmm. There's no vows of I do, but it is quite the party. So, something new.
Trish,
Am I the only one that didn't know what that was?
No.
Yep.
Yeah. You know your full-blood Dutch win.
That could be a podcast. Yes, Tom, were you going to ask a question?
I was just going to wonder, what was your basis for the revenue increase?
The revenue increase, looking at our projection for this next year, and also, so last year in March, April, we went through the pavilion rent rates. And those, you're just going to start to see those into this next calendar and fiscal year. Because by the time we put those in place and made them effective, we already had events on the books.
Right.
So that'll take into account some of that, but also just the number of bookings that we have, not just for 21.
Okay.
Because, I come to you with events that we have calendar year. Obviously, we're talking fiscal year with the budget. So even our 22 calendar year is already booking up with what? Exactly.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the biggest increase, having served on the board and watching this, is the increase in non-event bookings, business bookings and that sort of thing.
The corporate social. Mm-hmm.
Utilizing the weekday facilities.
Right. Which we just had a last-minute one today, about 40-some people there. So
that's what we wanted.
Yep.
So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Anything else? That was record. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tricia.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
Mike, you're up. State your name, please, when you get to the mic.
Mike Davis, Sheldon EMA Director. Thank you, Council and Mayor. I'll keep it about as short as her, maybe a little shorter. There really hasn't been any major changes on this year's budget. Calls were down a little bit last summer from the normal things we do, like Rise Fest, the Village Celebration, Celebration Day, stuff like that. Those were all canceled. But we did pick up a few other things. We helped with trick-or-treating downtown with the kids again. There was 2 Sanford parades, the Christmas Parade of Lights, Homecoming Parade, and Relay for Life. So, and the Easter service, too, that we had down in the middle of a snowstorm. So those are kind of things we kind of help with the community doing parking and, excuse me, traffic control. Weather last summer was very uneventful. I think we maybe had 1 page, if that, and that wasn't even an official page because there really wasn't any severe storms, which isn't a bad thing. Otherwise, we had the normal run-of-the-mill, accidents, fire calls, help, SCAT with anything they needed. We don't have any new purchases planned other than what's in our CIP, and monies for that could possibly come from the USDA or Rural Development Grant. And that would be like looking at an aero board to put on the back of the unit, new vests, coats, safety gear, basically wands, cones, stuff like that. So yeah, COVID's got some of our community events down, but we did pick up some to kind of compensate for that, which is good, and hopefully those continue next year too, in this whole year. So that's about all I have, unless there's any questions.
Okay. Thank you for being here today, and thank you your team as well for your work. Sheldon Fire, is that going to be you, Brad?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Brad Hint, Assistant Chief with Sheldon Fire Company. Our budget, not a lot. We did raise calls from $15.50 to $16. Did just some captains, chiefs, secretary, treasurers increases. We did add a pay for our lieutenants, which have some responsibility. Total wage increase of about $4,050, so not big numbers when you add it out. Then the rest of the line items are just increase the cost of goods as things go up. We did also replace some concrete on the south side of the fire station. We put that into our budget. Cost of goods going up. Contracted services, when people come in and do maintenance, yearly maintenance stuff that has to be done, we did increase that about $2,000. We did put in the budget to replace pagers every year. Instead of having a capital item, it's more of an ongoing expense. Then our capital improvement fund that's been out there for years since we started the capital improvement plan. This year we have ongoing $15,000 for fire gear. We're running into NFPA where fire gear is only good for 10 years, and you got to replace it.
When you say gear, you're talking coats and
boots, helmets, gloves, that kind of stuff. And we also want to get to where people have 2 sets of gear. Cancer is a big thing in the fire service. So when we have a fire, so we can take that gear back to the station, wash it, wash the contaminants out of it, the toxins out of it, and they have an extra set of gear ready to go. They're not waiting for everybody to get their gear washed. We only have 1 wash machine. Now also, aids in that. Our handheld radios were just about done. This year we'll complete that. That has helped tremendous with communications at the fire ground. We can understand people. People can hear us. We can talk to Primgar on our handheld radios. We still have a few dead areas in town, which is still there. Rescue tools, those are the jaws of life. We want to replace those. Those are about 15 years old. So that's in there. The heating and cooling at the training center is giving us problems with the age, and consider what the building was used for. The air conditioning system is bad, and we had the local plumber look at it. He'd suggest that we put in a new system. And then our AED and first aid kits, we carry those on the trucks, and they're about outdated. We bought those 15, 20 years ago just so we have one on our truck. If one of our guys go down, we've got that. And then also first aid kits, because accidents, mass trauma things, we would use those. And then we had the officers rate those, and that's why the 1, 2, and 3, and 4. So case we don't get the whole budget, they're prioritized amongst the officers. What we felt was a priority. And you can see the safety of our firefighters. So the council, we'd like to thank the council, mayor, and city staff for continually funding and keep the vision of good, top-notch fire department. And down the road here, I think the next meeting will have a report of 2020 calls, the biggest year, busiest year ever. So we'll be aware that that's something. Anybody's got questions? Be happy to answer them. Yes.
Some of those first three items are included in the rural development application too.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. I know one of the things years ago that came up was air packs, and that's a huge expenditure. Is that being, is that part of your CIP
yes, that's
plan?
out a few years. I think we got to, I would have to look. We've got a few years to go on those.
Okay.
That will be a big expense. They are air packs. They're about 75,000, and that's out in 25.
25, 26. Yeah. Okay.
So Brad,
Yes.
this is the second year budgeting. That includes the training center. You want to just kind of give us how things are going out there? We had a vision for it, and
Yes, we have.
can you speak to how the utilization
Yep.
is?
We started on remodeling that. We've done some interior work, painting, carpeting. We have a classroom out there. There is a firefighter 1 class going on out there they're using. We have taken the outside. We've built a couple props for roof ventilation. We have a couple different angles where we can go on, climb on a roof, a pitched roof, be able to cut a hole in it, work off a ladder, several different heights. Without being on the second story, we can do this 10 feet off the ground. Much safer. We bought 6 storage containers. We have those stacked, and we're on the process of turning those into live burn center, where we can go in and have actually a live burn with propane. We've got burners made up, and we'll be able to go in there and have a simulated fire that's controlled, a second story and also a third story. We also have a car that we put out there and also a dumpster. We'll be able to we burned the car out. We're working with the local petroleum company here in town, Co-op, with burners, so we'll be able to have car fires, simulate car fires over and over, dumpster fires. I'll also plan on reporting on that at the next council meeting. So we are starting to use that more and more. With COVID, our process kind of slowed down, but we're gearing back up to do more and more out there. We've done roof training with ladders up onto the roof, off the roof. We made some props to be able to, people that don't use chainsaws on every day, can they be able to use a chainsaw and a circular saw and K-12 saw, so different equipment. So we've been using that quite regularly.
Appreciate that update. The other part of the vision for the training center was that it was going to have an asset for the area for other community fire departments to utilize as well. Is that still the plan?
There's, I don't have the exact numbers, but there's other towns that are coming to this firefighter 1 class that's going on. So there's other people using that facility as we use it at the same time.
And does that generate any revenue back into it?
No.
Okay.
No.
Thanks, Brad.
But then you're also benefiting from our guys are staying here locally to train, and we're not paying to go out and do training at other towns. So.
All right. Any other questions for Brad? Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Moving on then to library. Hello, Nicole.
Hi.
Please state your name for the record.
Yeah, this is Nicole Weber. I'm the library director, and Roger Hibma is with me. He's the board president. This is kind of a combined presentation since the budget is being kind of presented by the board in collaboration with me. It is approved by the board before it's brought to you. You can see just from my memo just a little bit about what the library has done the past fiscal year. We were closed for a few weeks, just like the pavilion. As you can see, though, our numbers remained relatively high because we were able to come up with some creative ways to continue to serve the community, such as the curbside service, where we were able to pull books for people when they reserved them online or calling in. We've been doing programs on Facebook. We expanded our digital library collection so that people are able to download books online. And Take and Go Crafts. We did a summer program. We continued to do that where we collaborated with businesses. You might have seen some funny creatures looking around in the windows. That was the library. We did a bingo game with that. And then you can see, even though, like I said, the library was closed for a few weeks, our circulation did stay up pretty high. The year before, we were at 35,000. This past year, we were at about 33,000. So we're doing pretty good. The last few years, we've gradually increased every year since I've been here. And, a lot of that is thanks to the funding that we have. We're able to get a lot of new books. And like I said, we're also expanding our ebooks. So that's something that's new this year. As you look at our budget, you can see, as you look at our budget, you can see that what we've tried to do is align how we're actually spending items with what we're proposing. A lot of the line items you can see that we've actually lowered instead of increasing. We're trying to align our budget, again, with what we're spending. The major increases you'll see are in the wages, as well as the electricity and gas. Last year, we did get some feedback about continuing to maintain the library and some concerns you had about that. One thing that we've been looking at is continuing to make a plan as to how to maintain the library. A lot of money has been put into it with the renovation, which was very great to have the council and city as well as the community behind us to be able to do that. What we're looking at right now is our furnace is very old. It's from 1969. So in an effort to help prevent any major costs with fixing it, as well as electrical costs with heating and energy efficiency, we have looked into getting a new furnace, as well as a new thermostat that we would be able to program, because we also have the original thermostat. So we'd be able to turn the temperature up and down accordingly so we could set it lower at night. The library does have money in both the reserve savings and a money market account. So what we're requesting is that we're able to spend that money for the furnace. And I think Roger also wanted to comment on the budget as well.
What's that?
Did you want to comment on the budget as well?
Yeah, just probably a quick little comment on there, and it's more for FYI for down the road. The library only has one full-time employee, and in checking around, other libraries this size or towns this size or so have at least two probably or so or more. The problem we've had is with the assistant director that we haven't been able to there's been too much turnover in that without offering a full-time job with benefits. And so that creates a lot of strain on not only Nicole, but the other employees. And so that's what we're looking at, for just kind of an FYI for down the road, is to have money. We have an assistant director now, not working quite full-time, so it wouldn't be an additional person, but additional money to pay benefits. And that's what we need to fill that position. That's probably what we'll hopefully try and come back with next year, or if you want to provide it this year too, but that's not in the request, I guess. But that is just something that the library needs to offer more hours. We're not open any evenings right now, and that's unusual for a town this size. And with short of personnel and the turnover, that's been a problem. So, but with Nicole and the others, we're doing the best we can right now, but that's an FYI for down the road.
So with the increase in wages here, is that looking to bump people up that are already employed, or looking to get higher starting wages to maybe get some of these people, or what's your vision on that?
The reason that the wages weren't spent, I assume that you're kind of looking at this year versus next year. Like Roger said, we have been having problems keeping assistant directors.
Sure.
We've tried to be a little creative because right now we have somebody at 29 hours with no benefits. So we were looking at, that's almost too many hours for somebody to work part-time without benefits. So maybe we could try 2 part-time people. Because that might fit their schedule a little bit better. So we tried that. But being an assistant director, that's a lot of responsibilities. And so we were able to find somebody, but it was kind of still a lot of responsibilities, and it wasn't working with her home life. And so the savings we had last year was due to the fact that we were so long without an assistant director. So, like I said, we were able to find somebody and then not find somebody and then split the hours. We've been very lucky to have somebody hired now. I guess our concern right now is she is at 29 hours, and she does have health insurance now, but, how long is she going to be able to stay there? It took us year and a half maybe to find somebody that we think is actually going to be able to stay here. And it's just puts a lot of stress because we are, a pretty busy place right before like COVID. We have a lot of programs. We have a lot of people coming in. We have a lot of people checking out. The library is a busy place, and it just really is hard to find somebody without providing those benefits.
And the people that would qualify for that assistant position, are they especially trained? Or is
we're
it
looking
something
for
that
somebody with a minimum of approximately a 2-year degree. We're willing to do a lot of the training, but you're looking at somebody who would be responsible for the library when I'm not there. Sure. You're looking for somebody who would know how to do specialty work, like being able to put books into the computer, which, might sound easy, but that's that's kind of a specialty thing.
Right.
Not everybody can do that. Managing people, it's not something that you can find somebody just able to do.
And what is the size of your staff right now?
I'm a full-time person. We have approximately 2 part-time people, 3 library pages, and then we have a person that floats.
And in order for a full-time person, that would be rewriting city ordinance or code, or how does that work? Sam, I guess this is directed at you. Yeah.
First you need to budget it. So you'd have to budget in the general fund, and then you'd have to put the benefits in the benefits levy section. You'd have to write a job description. You'd have to identify, the reporting, process, who this person would report to, what their duties would be. That's basically the process.
Sure. Thank you.
And so Roger and I and Nicole, we had talked about their desire to have a full-time employee, and they weren't ready to ask for it this year, but I had suggested to them that if it's something that they were seeking for next year, that they should plant a seed at this hearing.
Yeah, I think that's something that we would be willing to look at. So.
Okay. Did you guys have any questions about this year's budget other than, like I said, the major increase is going to be the wages, the gas and electric, and then also just getting the furnace put in, along with planning for repairs for the library. We have started already looking at the roof, but that wouldn't be for another, 10 years down the line. But I just kind of want to put the bug in the ear that we are taking, what you said last year very seriously and making sure that we are making long-term plans for keeping the building up.
That's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
All right, thanks.
Thank you, Nicole.
Up next, we have the police report. Chief Birch.
Scott Birch, Sheldon Police Chief. All right, so this is all new to me, so bear with me. Hopefully Angie corrected all my mistakes on some of this math. But as you can see, the biggest increase for us will be wages. As we discussed before, going to the extra hours for each officer, that'll be an increase. And then obviously, potential raises. One of the things I want to note here is I think I talked with you about this, Angie. I think I was a little off on this about the 12,000. We figured it'd be a little bit more than that, didn't we? So, obviously with that 104 extra hours, it'll be 624 hours more a year. So it'll be a little bit more, but like I had said before in previous city council meetings, that'll save us, hopefully kicking that can down the road to get another officer. I'll just go down the list here. The next two are actually the things that I'm kind of shrinking or getting rid of. The wages for police training, I'm just going to put that into overtime or whatever we need to. The guys, if they go to training, I'll either flex them so they don't cost us overtime, or they'll be paid overtime if they have to cover it too. As the part-time wage, we have that down at $15,000. I want to shrink that to $1,000 because we're not paying our reserves besides the mandatory $1 a year. We have two guys that are going through training right now, as you know, and then I got two more potential to interview, so hopefully we'll be up to 4 hopefully here soon. Depends on how those interviews go. Overtime and shift pay, that's going to come from those other ones, so that's not an increase. Obviously, we want to increase, and some of that comes from this too, from moving money around, but we talked about increasing the allowances, which is your clothing items, things like that. We talked about putting the vest in CIP, but the problem with the vest, every 5 years they expire. Well, as guys retire and stuff, they don't fit other people, so you can't really determine how much you're going to need each year. So we thought about just putting that in the allowances. We figured $4,000 a year. Hopefully we don't need it every year, which we probably won't, but just in case, because a vest runs about $1,200. And of course they don't, like I said, not everybody's the same size. The education and training, we would raise that a bit, because part of that would come from some of those other places, but also Sam and I have talked about this, the potential at some point that we'd maybe join a local SRT team or as you'd call a SWAT team. That's something down the road we might want to try to do, because right now we don't have anybody but the state that we'd rely on. And unfortunately, because of where their members are located, it takes a while. So we've discussed joining a local team, which would require training. And then also the K-9 officer will have ongoing training too. So then we talked about the addition of the increase in the building and maintenance. As you know, the building's getting somewhat outdated. It's not too bad, but some of the stuff we have to replace, paint, fixtures, whatever we need to do. And then one of the bigger increases is going to be our lease rent agreements. That includes, IT support, things like the car camera software. As you guys know, everything's going electronic, so the increase of our report writing, CAD software, which is our dispatch software that we get from the sheriff's office, but we do pay a fee for some of that. And then also our cameras, they're backed up on the cloud, so that costs money. And then obviously some of the IT stuff, we're backing everything up now on a cloud too. So hopefully we'll go paperless here soon and get rid of some of that kindling that we have. And then one other item I wanted to add to was I wanted to budget annually for ammunition. I don't know if any of you guys are hunters right now, but it's pretty hard to find ammo. So I've always been under the school of thought that you stockpile. We're kind of getting thin right now, and so it's kind of hard for us to train some of the reserves because we're getting thin on ammo. So I wanted to do an annual budget of $4,000 for that. And then for the CIP, we talked about trying to get a truck, and everybody's been working on trying to do a USDA grant, so hopefully some of that will get covered. We figured going with a truck, the resale value is better, and then we're hoping it'll actually hold up better. And then we're planning on that one being an unmarked vehicle. And then, of course, the other expenses of outfitting it, the new mobile radios are about $5,000, a tablet, which would be the computer for it, potentially a camera. I'm hoping that we start doing the click it or ticket program, and we can start getting some things like cameras and radars and stuff for that. And then one thing that got added on there, since we removed the body armor, was the suppressors. That's more of a liability thing if we ever have to use a rifle. I hate to say it, but we'd probably get sued because someone would lose their hearing. So that's kind of the thought we thought about with that is that they make the rifle hearing safe. So $6,000 is probably on the high end. I'm sure we can get them a lot cheaper, but just in case. And then I was thinking there was something else I'm forgetting. Oh, and then as you can see, I kind of just put what the current state bids are for the trucks right now. And then I know they're getting quite a bit more for resale compared to what we got for our last two SUVs. And then I should mention too on the wages, and I completely forgot about this. I know I'd said we're not trying to add an officer at this point, but if we end up getting funding through COPS or a USDA grant or something to add an officer, obviously there'll be some costs for us for that. But if they can cover the large portion of it, that'd be great.
Could you give us a kind of a rundown of the state of the vehicles as your fleet sits right now?
So that's kind of one reason why I want to add one, because one of the new vehicles we had two new ones last year. They're both just roughly over 20,000. Of course, one's already been through a cornfield, unfortunately, but that's the price of doing business. That one we're going to convert to a K-9 vehicle, and I've actually found pretty minimal cost to do that. That'll be covered by the K-9 fund, the equipment stuff. We have a 2017 that's over 90,000 miles, so I'm hoping that one will work its way into a regular rotation. In 2 years, we'll probably have to replace that. But then this truck would be an unmarked, and so then I would have the guys use that for training, because it's not always fun to have to drive a patrol vehicle to training and stuff. So they could use that when they go to schools and stuff, and then I would use it for a general admin vehicle. And then hopefully they could use it sometimes when they're doubled up, when we actually have two officers on, kind of catch some people off guard.
Sure.
So,
do you see down the road a vision of having a officer have his own squad car?
I would love to do that. One of the things we talked about too is to maybe make that happen down the road is instead of buying new vehicles, we can buy used ones.
And then get them in rotation, because then you'd have less miles on them when you come to trade them off. And
Correct.
back to the COPS program there. Where do you see staffing, the next year, the next 5 years for officers?
So my goal in 5 years would be at 9 total officers, including myself.
Because the stuff I hear and read, and I think public safety, we keep talking about all these new employees. I think we start right here at the police department and add new employees for public safety.
So, with the way it's going right now, if we have someone that's out from COVID or whatever, a lot of guys are working by themselves the whole shift. So it gets kind of dangerous sometimes.
Yeah. One person on a shift and you're down, a couple of them one's hurt and out. So you're skim pickings at times.
It is.
So
I've had to come out a few times myself at night, which is part of the job. But.
Yeah. I think we need to seriously look at staffing the police department.
And hopefully with the USDA, we can find some means towards that, or at least freeing up some of that money. Now, you just got done hiring a new full-time officer, and now that you've had a little time to be on the other side of it, how difficult of a process was it to find an officer, and what were the major roadblocks that you encountered in doing so?
So it definitely helped us by extending that mileage range, because I had some certified officers apply, and unfortunately a lot of them didn't work out. So it obviously took longer than I wanted, but and then we'd open it up to just certified officers, hoping that we would get someone. It's not easy right now. So I'm hoping with these extra 104 hours and then the wage increase, that'll make it more attractive to guys. I know, we can't compete with the sheriff's office salary right now, but if we make it attractive enough, with guys building up seniority and vacation and stuff, I think these new wages put us close enough that it makes it harder for guys to leave. And then I think it'll attract more guys too. So I think it'll be easier. I'm hoping it will be.
And of course, now this year will be the first year with the implementation of the new command structure. So that should...
I think that'll help to kind of incentivize guys too, because at some point we'll have retirements with 2 sergeants too. So.
All right. Any more questions for Chief? Thank you, sir, for being here today. Moving on then to SEDC. Kurt.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. So first of all, I just want to say thank you on behalf of the Board of Directors. They wanted for me to extend our thank you to you for the continued support for our organization. 2020 obviously was a different year for all of us, including our businesses here in Sheldon. Obviously, COVID wreaked pretty big impact with the mandated closures and stuff that we had to go through. It also kind of forced away that we normally do business as a corporation. We had to do things differently too. Some things like comeback cash, that's a term that got thrown around a lot. We put over $250,000 in partnership with the city into our economy. You look at our local option sales tax numbers that come through. I know Angie is going to report on that a little bit later, but Sheldon was able to experience an increase in local option sales tax through COVID. I think that shows a big commitment from our local people that continue to support local through programs like Comeback Cash. We implemented a program called the Receipts for Sheldon Dollars program, where we incentivize people to go into our businesses, spend local, turn $100 of receipts into our office, and in turn, we'd give them $10 to be spent back into our local community. So we had over $250,000 in local receipts also turned in, which in turn, SEDC put back out over $25,000 in Sheldon dollars to be turned back into our businesses. So again, our partnership help makes those things possible. It makes our economy roll, and it's something we want to continue to move here into the future. And then another COVID relief program was the gift card program, which a little bit smaller, but when our businesses were closed or they're mandated to be closed, we weren't getting that tourism in and out. So one thing what we could do for cash flow was to sell gift cards. So if you wanted to go down to Langer's, maybe they were closed during the mandated closures for restaurants. You go buy a $50 gift card. The cash would go into the business. They could use a gift card whenever they wanted to. So we ended up giving out over 160 gift cards at $25 a piece. So it helped a little bit with the cash flow during that transition period. So anyway, a lot different than what we're normally accustomed to. I think it worked. I think the local option sales tax is a direct reflection of that. And the other thing that we had to manage as we kind of went through it is what is our development doing? Because construction prices went up exponentially and they continue to be high. But Sheldon overall was able to maintain those projects, and Co-op was able to get open in November. That's a long-standing project that we finally were able to get the doors open on. Jimmy John's announced their intention here in Sheldon, and they'll be opening up here hopefully in February as part of that project. Brewhouse, outstanding project to repurpose an old building, which is the Department of Transportation building. Now it's an absolutely outstanding brewery and coffee shop for Sheldon. Quickstar announced their project to take over the old Shopco building, and that demo will be starting this year. It'll be a new project. Cobblestone Inn and Suites partnering with the event center out there to put another 40 rooms, and have 101 motel rooms on the Highway 60 interchange. We'll help drive additional development out east, out by Tricia and the Pavilion. And then seeing some of our older properties get repurposed. The old Godfather's building, for an example, and the old Baumgart's building both got sold this year. So all this amongst COVID, it's kind of astounding. We live in a region, it's not just Sheldon, but we live in a region of the state of Iowa that was able to kind of get over the top of all this. So in saying that, we have an aggressive plan going forward. We want to continue to put our best foot forward to make sure that things continue to work here in Sheldon. And our partnership together has worked over the years, and we hope that can continue to evolve as we move forward. So we are asking just a small increase of $5,000 to help with our operations here for the next fiscal year. SCDC actually runs on a calendar year, so we're January to December. We're working on a fiscal year budget here, which is a little bit different, but we are asking for a $5,000 increase to assist in our ongoing efforts to be creative, because COVID is not through yet. I mean, we're still dealing with some of it. So we'll be wearing our thinking caps here to figure out additional ways to get people to commerce and spend money locally and to do business in Sheldon. One of the other programs that the City Council has approved over the years is our Storefront Improvement Program, which they had allocated about $20,000 a year to help provide forgivable loans to existing businesses in Sheldon who may want to do exterior improvements such as signage, windows, door replacement, window improvements. We provide a forgivable loan through our office to help with those improvements. Since the inception of the program back in 1996, the city has invested about $400,000 to the program, which in turn has leveraged about $1.6 million in building improvements. So those dollars do get reinvested, and they get reinvested to help keep our buildings in good shape here in Sheldon. About 120 forgivable loans since 1996 have been granted, and currently have about 15 outstanding loans here that are on our loan portfolio. So we'll be requesting additional, or just the same allocation as in years past, so we can continue to allocate that program and facilitate that moving forward. So, and the last thing I just want to mention too, and we'll get into this as we get into the bonding discussion in the future, is we own ground out east with Crossroads, Crossroads North. We were bought from Grantster a couple years ago. We facilitated the infrastructure for phase one a couple years ago. We do own additional ground out there for consideration to opening up and making it additionally all of it shovel ready, which if that project comes to fruition, it gets completed, it would make all acres of ground that we own in Sheldon that we actually have possession to shovel ready. So I know that's one thing we'll discuss later on. I know our development committee with SCDC and our board would like to consider that this year. I know we as staff have kind of talked about it too and help prioritize some of those capital projects as we consider those probably tomorrow night. So, so there's that too. So that's really the information I want to provide. There's really no change. other than the additional $5,000 request for to help us with the operations and to continue with doing what we're doing. So again, on behalf of the board, thank you. Appreciate the partnership. Happy to answer any questions that you guys may have.
Any questions for Kurt? No questions, just a big pat on the back for what you guys have pulled off in this year, as tough as it's been.
Yeah.
To have lost revenue up in a year like this is fantastic. And a major project announced and a couple buildings sold, on and on it goes. And that's a feather in you guys' hat, so thank you.
Well, appreciate it. And again, it's all about partnerships. We talk about it all the time. I mean, it's about hand in glove and be able to sit across the table from you guys and you guys vice versa with the board. It just helps get things done. So continue doing that as we move forward. So thank you.
All right. Start with a quick one. Cemetery. Really no changes to operation. We're asking for $15,000 to replace some mower, $20,000 from lost again to do some more road repairs. The only addition would be we're looking at another $3,500 transfer from lost to help with the maintenance fund. Everything else is in the memo. Questions?
Todd?
Yes.
Didn't we have in this budget for repair, cemetery road repair?
Yeah, we did 20,000 2 years ago.
Yeah.
We have 20,000 we're going to expend yet this spring.
Okay.
And then we're asking for an additional. My goal, and I know it's only 20,000 at a time, but it's the funding that's available, is to get the outside road, so the one down to the shed off of Union, and then back up to East 9th done, and then we can start. And I'd like to do all that in concrete because that's the road that carries the biggest part of traffic. And then once we get that done, then I think we can start working on the interiors with maybe some asphalt and some cheaper repairs.
Thanks for the status on that.
Yep, not a problem. Park.
Okay.
Expecting both revenues and expenditures to be consistent as far as operations go. We again would like $10,000 from lost and $5,000 from the hotel motel tax, which we've utilized the last couple of years for a lot of general improvements, playground equipment, picnic tables, benches. There's plenty more need in there for those type things. We'd like to continue with that, and we're looking for an additional $30,000 to do some more tree removals and potentially partner with the road use tax on doing some road repair. I'd love at a minimum to do from the railroad tracks back to where the grass and leaf dump is. That is in really poor condition. 30,000 isn't going to do it, but I think we could partner with road use tax there because everybody in this town uses that road, so it probably makes some sense. That's all I have unless you have questions. Okay, rec and pool. We're looking at basically no changes. The only thing that I think that's worthy of even conversation or mentioning is we are recommending that we transfer $52,000 from loss to cover the wages at the pool, and that is essentially an accounting function to help the general fund. Simple as that. That's not an increase in wages. That's the same number that we had budgeted the year prior, just a different way to pay for it. Questions?
I realize it's a different pool, but how long is our contract at the pool, the indoor pool?
What do we have left? 2032.
Okay.
Thanks. I didn't know that. Anything else from rec or pool? Streets. We are looking to utilize an additional $14,000 out of reserves to pay for more tree removals in the right-of-ways. There's just, after doing that survey, that we worked with Andrew Larson with, it's shown the need. I think he asked or told us to figure on at least 17. I'm hoping to use some of the park because some of those trees are right-of-way trees, some of those trees are park trees. So between the two, we're well exceeding that, but that's something we want to focus on. We're looking at $175,000 for basic repairs, chip seal, overlay, crack seal, that kind of sort of thing. That's been a pretty standard number. The one thing I did want to mention that's maybe a little bit out of the ordinary is we are looking for $168,000 to do some work to our public works shed. That's the main shed there right off of Western Avenue. The center 4 bays of that shed are not insulated, they're not heated, and that's where the bulk of our snow removal equipment is stored. So it's plugged in all the time, and then, after a storm, you go to thaw it out, you're mixing, you're moving. It's just not very conducive to keeping trucks in good condition. Yes, we just built the new shed, which we did not heat, but that was by design because we knew we would rather have heated bays in our main shop and move our cold storage down there. The reason that number is so high is that's got high ceilings. So what we're actually looking at doing is spray foaming the whole works instead of trying to put ceilings and what else in there. Well, the steel on that building is from like 1990. It's showing some wear. I really don't want to insulate it with 30-year-old steel. So it's new steel, and then the insulation, and then installing heating. So that's why that number escalated that high. Some other basic requests in there that I'm not going to read off to you for equipment. We'd like to continue on with street reconstruction. We're proposing that we do a bond and rebuild Rainbow Drive from Oak to Washington at a cost of a little over $840,000. We're proposing that we spend some money at the intersection of Highway 18 and 34th Avenue and put in a stoplight and right turn lanes off of the highway. We wouldn't necessarily have to do the two together unless the DOT says. I think we should budget for both, and I would also recommend, and I think the rest of the staff agrees with me, that we just put them in because it'll make the intersection better. It'll make it safer, it'll make it quicker, and whatever. So that cost is a little over $800,000. Our proposal, which we'll go over later, is actually for a $2.5 million bond. I know those two numbers don't add up to 2.5. We've got some other projects in mind that I don't have specific costs to for you today, but I would be leaning towards potentially spending some money in the downtown areas. I'll mention the J&B parking lot. If you've ever actually looked at that thing, it's a disaster. Several of our alleys downtown are in very poor condition. Our thought is we could take some of the balance of the funds, depending upon where we end up with numbers, and utilize some of that in there. Western Avenue will be. If you recall, last year we did apply for some FAST Act money. We did not receive money. Sam and I have been in conversations with several people on that. We plan to put an application together again. It'll look slightly different than last year's. Maybe more than slightly. It could look substantially different than last year's application. But we'll be bringing that to you probably in March for approval to apply. That money, if awarded, would come like in 5 years. So we don't need to budget for today, but if we're awarded that grant, we do need to plan for the expenditure later.
Is Western going to last 5 years?
We are going to have to do some patching in some areas to get us by. The rest of it, we'll have to hold on. I know that seems like a long time to wait, but when you're talking about a $2+ million project as proposed right now, last year's grant application had 60% funding in it. That might have been a little excessive. That might have been one of the reasons why we didn't get funded. We'll likely come back with a little smaller number this year.
Is that the same grant as what we used on 16th Street?
That's the same grant that we used and got on 16th Street. We also redid Country Club Road and East 9th Street with those same monies. You just got to be patient. There's only so many funds that come. If you want to play and wait for that money, you got to kind of wait your turn.
Revolving fund. Revolving fund as far as.
Yeah, and that fund
granted, huh?
that fund has 9 counties that are eligible for money, and then any road in town that's an extension, essentially a major collector of one of those county roads, qualifies if you're large enough, which I'm not going to get into it tonight, but we used to be, now we're not. Sam and I think we should be. We'll argue some more. Then you get your own classification system later, but that's not for tonight's discussion.
Right.
I'm happy to see us continue to approach streets, because I think I could add to this list, and I'm sure everybody else could, but we need to stay on that, and hopefully we get caught up in the public's eye at some point.
Point taken.
So in that light, and this isn't for this year's budget, of course, but as we move towards next year's budget, can we take a look at what the next tier of repairs priority would look like?
I think it's sitting in front of you in my memo.
Okay, that's it right there then.
I mean, those are some of the streets that I would like to go to next.
Then how about the next level then? So
yeah, and understand once you get past this year's funding, the rest of those numbers are Todd estimates.
Oh yeah.
So I haven't spent money on engineering. Those are just. I'm not saying that they're way off, but those are not maybe necessarily exact estimates.
Yeah. And all I'm really saying, Todd, is nothing we haven't talked about in the past, is that we just want to make sure that we continue to look at our budget long term as far as reasonable and responsible movement towards getting our infrastructure up to stream.
Yeah, and for the council's benefit, I will tell you that we as staff looked at a larger number than 2.5 in that bond, and for a number of reasons, we decided to throttle back. And I'll be honest with you, one of them is just the ability to design, bid, and manage a project. You get spread pretty thin, and myself, I have other responsibilities other than just managing a street project here or there. And then beyond that, it's payment wise and a matter of taking on debt and relieving debt. So, not saying you can't make a change to the number, but that's the number that staff felt like was doable.
Right. No, it's all positive. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Anything else on streets?
You got permission to put a stoplight in yet?
So, yeah, I should have hit on that. The answer to that is no, but I would say we have much more positive information than we've ever had before. And I think we're close enough that it makes sense to get a project designed and get it in front of the DOT. And I know Sam readily agrees and push the issue and see if we can't get it done. So understand if they say no or not now, we'll have to push it back. But we've got to put something in front of the DOT to push the issue. I think their last statement was something to, you meet some of the merits, not all the merits, but we give you a little grace here. I took it as when I was a teenager and my dad said, well, maybe. That's a yes. Let's go. So, anything else?
I used to get in trouble sometimes with that interpretation.
I still get in trouble sometimes, Tom. All right, water department. Minimal operational increases. I think the biggest thing you'll notice is we did add just shy of $115,000 in expenditure and $142,000 in revenue, and that's for the sale of water to Clay Row Water System out in South Dakota. We have discussed that, so that'll bring in, if they use the $300,000 a day, just a little over $27,000 more. So we're working towards that.
Where are we at with that? Are they moving forward on that? Or
so they have the contract. We went back and forth. We are, I would say, within a couple weeks of selling water. That was the latest news I got from Steve over at Clay Row Water.
Good.
Yep. So starting soon. We want to spend some money with a consultant to start talking about what sort of equipment we'll need once Lewis and Clark Water arrives. I'm anticipating that water to be here, assuming on funding and everything else, in 2024. So it's time to start laying out our exact plans of how we're going to receive and manage that water. On that note, I believe I told you a year ago that I thought there would be some merit in paying to raise Lewis and Clark's water tower west of town. I'm going to tell you today that we've crunched the numbers on it, and I've got estimates on what that cost to Sheldon would be, and I'm not recommending we do it. It simply boils down to when Sheldon made the decision in 1993 to take water not under pressure, they set the fate that we'd be repumping the water. Payback is close to 40 years on 500,000 a day usage. To me, that doesn't make sense. And then I looked at a booster station instead of raising the tower, and that payback is 22 to 24 years, depending upon what numbers you want to use. just doesn't make sense. And I calculated that based off of pumping costs. So it cost us about 6 cents a thousand at 90 PSI to get water out the door. So when you start running those numbers on what you got to pay extra on theirs versus payback, that's how I come up with the 24 and 50 or 40 year paybacks. So not recommending that we do that. If council agrees with me, then I'll let Lewis and Clark know that's not our intention. Our second tower, of course, is always a subject. You'll notice it's not in this budget. It's the one at the corner of Country Club Road and 16th Street that we have the land purchase for. We have that project in our CIP as fiscal year 23-24. I'll start designing it tomorrow if you guys want to spend the money, but financially I think it makes a little more sense in a year or two, and development-wise I believe we can wait that long, but I don't believe we can wait any longer than that. You don't want to be reactive on that tower. We need to have the tower up and going before we need it. Rate increase, as you know, we had DGR run a rate increase for us, so our intent would be to follow that rate structure, which is an average of a 9.5% increase across the board. It's variable. The low rate payers are going to pay 4 to 5% increase, and the high rate payers as high as 17%, if you recall from the rate study. So that's all I have, unless you have questions. Oh, yeah, one other thing to keep in mind. I'll be coming, and I know I've spoken to all you about this, I'll be coming to you likely in August of 21 and starting to lay the groundwork to ask you to sign a commitment agreement with Lewis and Clark to join in on the expansion water from 45 million gallons a day to 60 million gallons a day. What that means for Sheldon is an increase of available water from Lewis and Clark from 1.3 million gallons a day up to 2 million gallons a day. I firmly believe that that's the right thing to do, and that secures our long-term water needs, especially when our current sources are either number one, of poor quality, or number two, are not long-term reliable sources and can't be. We can't drill more shallow wells, not unless we want to change how we do operation, which comes at a very high cost. That estimate would be, if I didn't write it down, $3.5 million, something like that. You wouldn't have to commit to spending those dollars today. What we'll be hopefully committing to, if you agree with us, is that you agree to come on when that time comes. My guess is that's 8 to 10 years from today. But I sit on that Lewis and Clark board, and for planning purposes, we want to know who's in and who's not, and we want them to be serious about it and commit to it now, so we can plan properly going forward.
So does that mean that we sign on to commit to utilizing that much more water by that approximate time frame?
Not utilizing, but paying for a portion. So the way the rate structure with Lewis and Clark Water is set up is you pay a capacity charge. So you pay that capacity charge currently today is 44 cents per thousand. You pay that charge on every 1,000 gallons of water that you have reserved. You then pay a water rate on the water that you actually use. The current water rate is 61 cents a thousand. So as a Lewis and Clark customer, if you utilized all of your allocation, your net effective rate would be $1.05 per thousand. If you used 50% of your allocation, and I don't have that in front of me, but your net effective rate might be $2 a thousand. So you do pay something on all the water you do, but it's like an insurance policy, and it's a commodity that's short in our area. And if we believe Sheldon is going to continue to prosper, we probably won't need that extra 700,000 gallons in my career, but we'll need it someday, or at least that's my thought. And if you don't buy it now, you won't get it.
What are the odds of being able to sell some of that if we don't need it?
High.
I was going to say, it seems to me that would be a pretty good chance of being able to sell it to somebody.
Potentially, Pete, on the long term, but you got to remember, if you sell it on the long term, you may not have it when you want it, and potentially on the short term.
I know.
Yeah.
All right.
Water's our number one resource that we need, and it's quality and quantity.
So in essence, what you're saying is that 44 cents, that number would be going up.
It'll still be 44 cents a thousand. It's just the dollar value will be 44 cents a thousand on 1.3 million as current reserve capacity, and that would switch to 44 cents a thousand on 2 million.
Okay.
So 44 cents a thousand, the upcharge is 44 cents a thousand on 700,000. So take 44 cents times 700, and that's your extra daily cost.
Right. We need to keep moving, so.
Yeah.
It's
well aware of that.
I'm glad you mentioned it, though, because I was going to ask.
I mean, it's food for thought, but it's a discussion for another day at this point, I think.
Fair enough. Anything else for water? Wastewater. We just planning for the future. 21,000 for some UV bulbs. 10.5 for a new diesel pump. Everything else is in the memo. Ange and I looked at what we thought we should do for rates. Got concurrence from Sam. We don't have a current rate study on wastewater. We think we should do another one, but in our opinion, we should wait until the water rate study is done and then actually do the two together and act the two together moving forward. So what we're proposing is a 3% increase, and that gives us 6 months worth of operating cash, 1 year of debt payments in reserve, and also gives us the ability to fund the CIP. Just to note, if we wouldn't have had an extra $1 million in funds that we're utilizing on those 2 lift stations left over from the wastewater plant, we would need a much larger increase than the 3%. So that's one way we were able to keep that. By reutilizing those funds, we were able to keep our rate increases low. Questions?
Have we addressed, or at least outlined in the budget, the addressing of the older infrastructure downtown? That, I know there's been a lot of cameras, a lot of scoping, a lot of that sort of thing that I know a number of people have talked about. Just kind of gauging the pulse and where we're at on that.
Yeah, so we were working with about $25,000 a year to do manhole repairs and linings. We've now got that number up to is it 50 or 75 in this year's budget. And if you look out on the CIP, we're trying to escalate that up to 150 a year in time. I just was trying not to do it overnight. We have a lining project happening on 4th Street yet this spring. We're working with Beck Engineering on that as we speak. I'm planning on that going out to bids actually March 2. So we are trying to start addressing some of the aging infrastructure, but slowly.
Sure.
Yeah. That's all I got.
Okay. Thank you, Todd.
Thanks, Todd.
Does anyone need a bathroom break or anything right now, or can we keep chugging?
We only have 15 minutes left, so.
I know. That's why, but all right.
I'm good.
And we're up to you.
All right. You have my memo. It explains what the different levies are for. A couple things I'm just going to point out on my part. The other parts they've already spoken about. I've, at this time, have a 3% across-the-board increase for wages. We base the health insurance at an 8% increase for the premium costs, and I do have plugged in the maximum federal IRS contribution for the HSAs that all employees are on right now. Questions? Tax levy, we were able to keep it almost the same. It's a very, 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 very slight increase. You'll note in a minute, we are going to take the debt payment for the emergency services bond out of the debt service. The employee benefits, because our premiums actually came in quite low in the current fiscal year because of everybody switching to the HSA, we were able to keep that at a very minimal increase. Questions on the levy?
Good news.
Sorry, what was that?
It's good news.
Yeah.
Surprising news, actually. I didn't expect that. Go on.
Bonding capacity. As you see there, one bond is paid off now. And just an FYI, we do have later on where we are planning to pay off the event center bond, so that will help. You go down to the bottom, you see the valuations for the current fiscal year for O'Brien County and Sioux County, which comes to $348,293,772, and you're required to keep 5%, minus your bond debt and our other debt, which is the rebates and the debt for the emergency services. Shows you our available bonding capacity, which is nearly $8.9 million. And then down what the 25% would be, 20% and 15%.
It's good news, too.
Any questions on that? Okay, revenues. I'm just going to hit on some highlights. I'm not going to go line by line. Let's see, gifts received, that is Shop with a Cop there, that second one. The canine donations, I expect that to level off after we get the canine purchase, probably in this fiscal year. That'll be an amendment, of course. Going down to the fire service charges, you see there's kind of a bit of an increase there. We're now putting the lift assist that the fire performed for the ambulance into that line item. Increased ambulance charges a little. Garbage collection fees, third from the bottom. Oh no, never mind. That's not, no, I've got to hit on something different on that one. Sorry. Let's see, next page. This is a budget that Rec turned in. Cemetery charges for fees increased by $5,000, open and closing. Unfortunately, this year we did have a record number of burials, and I don't know if that will continue, so I did increase that. Pool, they submitted their revenue for that. Page 3. Let's see. New one there is the CDBG Economic Development, about halfway down the page. That's the village project. I have figured I think it was a $600,000 project or $650,000, and what I think will be left for next year.
Which one is that?
The village project, the CDBG Economic Development.
Oh, CDBG, okay.
Yep. Going down, transfers in we'll cover later. General property taxes are up at the bottom of the page just because of evaluations. Page 4, all the taxes. Interest, of course, is a bit higher. The bottom one there, miscellaneous revenues, that is cleanup days revenue. So I increased that considerably. Questions on the general fund?
Not for me.
Page 5, library. As Nicole hit on it, I think she's pretty much explained it. The only thing I was going to make sure you're aware of was their property taxes. Historically, we're at $127,500. The current year, they had asked for more, which was $131,000, and they are asking to keep that at $131,000. Any questions for library? You should have probably asked Nicole. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Page 6, airport. That again is their budget that was turned in. Park. Todd kind of hit on that, I think, or no. Who hit on? Did you explain Park? Yes, you did. Yeah. So that's what they turned in. And I'm sorry, on the top of page 7, my note, I fixed that. That's actually $40,000 from lost, not $10,000. Museum, there's pretty much the same. General equipment reserve. That's basically a fund of leftover money from insurance money that we receive from hail damage, and sometimes rec puts some money in there for unexpected revenues, and then they expend only what they've got in there for revenues. So nothing really there. DARE fund is the same. Airport depreciation is nothing because we had zeroed out that bank account basically. Capital protection equipment reserve, I did increase their transfers a little bit. Otherwise, nothing much changed there. Excuse me. Page 9, cemetery, it needs to be non-perpetual care. We are planning to move some money from loss to help with some upkeep in the cemetery. Capital fire protection, that is for different fire service charges. Sorry, those bottom two lines are actually the same. I'm sorry, I don't know why that's like that. Hotel motel tax. I am not planning very much money in hotel motel tax. I think right now you see where we're at with receiving the first 2 quarters of $44,400. So I'm only basically doubling that to $88,000, which is down from $180,000 in the current budget, which I don't think we'll see.
So Angie, you're thinking that's plateaued, then that's recovered to the point to where we can sustain it now?
I hope so. I don't know. Last year, the next payment, which is going to be coming probably next month or late this month, was our horrific one. Do you remember what that was, Kurt? Was it only like a couple $1,000s?
So, yeah, it was, I think, $5,000 total.
Yeah.
If you did a percentage out, I think it was like $2,000 for, the city.
It was pretty bad.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions right now? Okay. Rec trails, not much has changed. I did increase their fundraising because I think this is the year that they will plan to do cow patty bingo, and that usually brings in a decent amount of money. We continually plan a transfer from lost into the rec trails for them to continue to build their balance. Road use tax. The state suggested that we plan an 8% decrease over the current year, so that is what I have plugged in for road use entitlement. Depreciation is just to cover their capital, comes from road use tax. Trust and agency, or employee benefits, sorry. Transfer in is a transfer from loss, which is set by resolution to help buy down the levy. Then you've got your emergency fund, which is property tax or just an emergency fund levy. Seizure, I increased the interest. The gifts received for the sports complex, that's a commitment from NCC every year. Local option sales tax, I did decrease that. Actually, I kept it the same as the current fiscal year, but you always figure in the reconciled local option sales tax from O'Brien County and Sioux County, and those were lower in the current fiscal year, so that's why it's a little bit lower there. TIF, that speaks for itself. Interest for TIF LHAP, LMI, Aquatic Center. Then you've got the FEMA. I hope we don't have anything this current or in this next fiscal year for them. Then you've got your debt service, which is all of our money that is generated by the debt levy. Gifts received for the event center. That should be the majority of the final pledges, and that should hopefully pay off the event center capital project fund account, which is constantly sitting in a negative balances because of the pledges. Future projects, trails maintenance, we closed that account. We put it all in the trails checking account for less confusion. Crossroads Pavilion capital, that's where the Civic Center tax comes in here. Questions at this point? Sewer lift upgrade is just interest. Same with most of these capital improvements. So we've got Skemper, you've got Sunshine. The 2011, that's Floyd. Crossroads North is the 2017. Then you've got Sheldon Crossing, which has residential and commercial lots. I do have some money in there for some residential lot sales in a little bit, where we get reimbursed from Mid-American when the home sales, they pay us back for the connection for electric and gas. D&D, that is money coming primarily from Lost. It's to cover some dangerous and dilapidated costs, plus we decided this year that it's to cover the dumping of the recycle bin in the parking lot, which will be a transfer from Lost, and it'll be a conversation later. Questions? What?
3 times a week.
Yes.
We're at 3 times.
Top of page 17, we've got the street improvement capital project. That's just interest. Runger addition interest. Water, Todd hit on that. We did the average increase of 9.5%, which of course increases the tax as well.
So is the new revenue on water with sale?
Yes.
Where's that at in here?
The new revenue, what?
You know, the water that we're selling?
No, that's in a different fund.
Okay. Cool.
The miscellaneous revenues, there's an increase there because I believe it was a year ago we actually increased the processing and reconnection fee, so we're just planning ahead for that. Then the next one, the water improvement, which is Lewis and Clark, that's where the Clay Rural Water sales is projected, the 142,350 that Todd talked about. Then you've got your water depreciation, you have your water deposits, sewer, as Todd said, we planned an increase of 3%. Sewer reserve is just interest. Northside sewer hookups, that's revenue that comes in when the new home is built and they have to hook on to the Northside sewer. So there's not a lot budgeted there. Wastewater depreciation. Then you've got your sewer sinking, which is a transfer in for the sewer debt payment. Your self-insured, the transfer in is from employee benefits because we levy for the HSA, but it's paid out of this fund, so we have to transfer that. And then the 33,150 is the employee's contribution. Then you got cafeteria, and there you have your revenues. Questions? I tried.
And you didn't even see the clock if you had it done. That's
I have a watch.
Okay.
But, yeah. Anything, do you want me to even start on the expenses?
I don't think so.
Okay.
So pretty straightforward from last year then.
It is, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For some reason I feel comfortable. I don't know why. But.
We have 2.
Okay. So yesterday, rural development called me, and the application wasn't even submitted until yesterday afternoon. But they called me in the morning, and it sounds like we have. We're careful not to promise, but it sounds like we have a really good chance of getting funded. And one of the things that we talked through was, most of what we've asked for is emergency services equipment, but we did ask for a police officer. So we talked about that. And they said it would likely, and there's a number of qualifiers in the conversation, but it would likely be, if we were given an award for that, it would likely be $50,000. Well, Chief and I have talked about it, and it's $56,000 approximately for wages, another $30,000 for benefits, and so it's an $86,000 load, for 1 year. So one of the things that you will need to sleep on is when we brought this budget to you, we're very proud of the fact that this budget is virtually flat in terms of property tax increase, and you have to go out to 3 decimal places to get to an increase. So, and there's 2 key components that we were able to add in to the budget, and it still didn't go up. One is the $107,000 fire truck and police car payment is coming from the debt service levy. instead of ambulance depreciation to help out the ambulance depreciation fund, and the other is the benefits for the full-time proposed ambulance employee is coming from your trust and agency levy. And even then, your taxes aren't going up. However, if we decide we want to add a new police officer, you really have a couple of options. You can go ahead and move forward as is with your full-time SCAT person, knowing that you may have to come back later and address that issue if you want to add a police officer. Another option to consider is having moving forward with a part-time SCAT person while you wait to see how things play out with your full-time police officer, whether you get that or not, and get that award. So it's just something that you're going to have to think about. Originally, last fall, you all remember, we were absolutely planning on coming forward with this budget on having a new police officer. We had a very creative chief of police who came up with the idea of the 12-hour shifts. It's an idea that, and adding more coverage, it's an idea that I didn't think of, that he thought of, that I think is really good, and he had the budget in mind. But we do have now an opportunity potentially to get funded, but there won't be enough funding without impacting the taxation unless something else gives. So I just want you to be aware of that, and we can talk about that more tomorrow.
So, sleep on that. With that, take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Support. Roll call, please.
Kent.
Aye.
Brewster.
Aye.
Farahona.
Aye.
Eggers.
Aye.
Hamel.
Aye.
And we'll see you all tomorrow. Same time, same place.
Hey, Chief.
Sam.
Chief Burt.
I didn't want to ask it. That's okay. No, that's fine. So I just was thinking. No, only good things. Unless they stipulate.
Yeah, probably get an extra stroke. That's okay. As long as you don't get sheep. We'll be able to rest the season. Here, I interrupt you to try to get the thing.
Next year. This year or
That's a long